Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is your show host speaking for Radio Works World. And today I'm going to be hosting your show. And my name is Joanne Morrison. And welcome. I've been invited to host the show this evening and talk a little bit about myself. Which is I have quite an interesting story, and I was very fortunate to have met Marina recently, and she heard some of my story when I was giving a talk at one of her amazing events. And my sort of life, I'm a health coach. I run a company called healthimpactcoach.com, and I also have a juicing company, a small juicing company, which is a bit of a hobby. It started out really just to sort of boost my health and well-being, and that will become apparent as we go along. But it's a real passion for me to incorporate that into my lifestyle. Makes me feel very healthy and very well on a daily basis, so I have to advocate that. So, as I say, my name's Jo Morrison. And I'm here really to talk to you about my journey, which was predominantly a health-driven journey. I sort of had a fairly ordinary upbringing with a lovely family, 2 brothers and a sister, mum and dad. And my father was in the RAF, and we travelled extensively, in my early years. And during that time, I moved house a lot. And had to make friends at school, a lot of different schools, which was quite a difficult time for me when I was younger, because although I really enjoyed going to school to do drama and to do fitness, which was my favourite thing, I didn't enjoy it because I got bullied quite a lot at school. And it was because I had bright ginger hair, I had lots of freckles, I was very short, and I was very sporty, and as much as I wanted to fit in with everybody, I just didn't. So there's always, we know what happens in schools, and if you don't sort of fit in, it does affect you. My school life, I enjoyed as much as I could, but I couldn't wait to leave. And I left at 15, actually. I did my exams. I took my CSEs in those days and O-levels, and left and went to work in an office and learned as much as I could over the course of, say, probably about 3 years, doing everything from typing to answering the phone, that type of thing. And then I decided to join the army as a PT instructor, which was it wasn't really very random, because it was in keeping with, my dad's work. And I'd pretty much grown up in a gym as a young child. So I decided that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to join the army and be a PT instructor, the same as my dad, because I suppose my dad has been one of the biggest influences in my life, really. So off I went. I was selected to go directly in as a PT instructor. And they didn't really do that very often. They had very few intakes where you could just go in as an instructor, but usually you had to go in with another skill set. So you might join as a clerk or a driver or something else and then transfer across. But I was very fortunate that I got selected directly in. And I really loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed the army. I had an amazing training and learned about everything to do with sports, trained in all the sponsored sports, learned how to coach and teach and control large groups of people. And I spent most of my time training new soldiers that had joined the army. So boys would join, girls would join, and they would go out as men and they would go out as women. So within a short space of time, people would grow so extensively in that sort of 9-week period. You would see them come in as a very scared, sort of wide-eyed teenager, and then within 3 months, I suppose, 2 to 3 months, you would just see a magnificent change. They would start to take on responsibility. They would become leaders in their own right, really, because you have to grow that quickly in the military. And I was in the army for 4 years, and then I went over to Germany, and I worked for the British Forces Youth Training Scheme over there as a civilian. I came out of the army, and I worked with young people that were children of soldiers. So I travelled, my territory was the whole of the north of Germany, and I used to run seminars and programs for young people to teach them about what it was like to be in England, because some of them had been there for many years. And I also covered Berlin, and that was before the war came down. So it was quite an interesting time and quite an interesting tour, working with the military. And then I came back to the UK, and I sort of took a few different jobs, really. I temped a little bit. I could turn my hand to most things, but I also then wasn't feeling too good. After a few months of being back home, I didn't feel particularly well. So I took myself off to the doctor's one morning, and just thinking that he would just give me something to make me feel better. I don't know quite what I thought he would give me. I can't say that I felt ill, really sick. I just didn't feel right. I knew something was wrong. So anyway, the doctor was concerned and said he wanted me to go and see a consultant. And I then got an appointment, which was the next day, the next morning at 9 a.m. So I knew something was wrong. And in that meeting with the consultant, he did tell me, he told me that I had advanced aggressive cervical cancer. And he said they had to deal with it now. It was at a point where it was going to become invasive, and they needed to deal with that. Now, at the time, I wanted to have children. I was married, and I asked about having children. And he said, "I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. We have to deal with the cancer." And he also explained in the same meeting that I would go through the menopause. So I'm 26 years old, and I'm sitting the day before. Nothing was wrong. Everything was great. My whole future was planned ahead of me. And then suddenly that was all changed. And I didn't really know what to do. To be fair, when you're sitting in front of a consultant and you're told all that news, it's very hard to absorb it. And I didn't really know how to react, what I was supposed to do. I was quite numb, to be honest, and so I understand when other people are now in that situation exactly how they feel. It took me a little while. Really, my body then became somebody else's. It became the property of the medical centres, the property of the hospitals, and I just had all the treatment. I had radiation treatment and quite extensive treatment, and as a result, it sort of damaged my body quite badly. But you don't really have time to think. You just have to get on with it. And it was only really when my treatment was finished after about 4 or 5 months that the impact of what was going on started to hit me. And I went to Northern Ireland and was working over in Northern Ireland, and then I found that I started to struggle with the cancer. To this point, I've been extensively thinking about the child, not being able to have children, and then I realised actually I'd had cancer, and I started to deal with that. So I had to find a way that I could cope, to be honest, because I knew I wasn't coping. I pretended that I was. On the outside, I looked as if I was, but actually on the inside, I was very scared, and I was hiding it, from people around me. And so I decided, I took dramatic action. I sort of left Ireland, I went back to England, and I almost retreated into myself, and I took time out on my own. My marriage broke down, and I just had to find a way of dealing with what was going on, because I felt I'd lost my identity as a woman. I think that was the biggest thing. I'd always expected as a woman that I would have children and grandchildren and follow the path that most women follow. Not every woman, but most women will follow that path, and men. But that was suddenly not an option. So I had to find a way to deal with that. And I decided that it was up to me. You know, it was the way I thought about life was entirely in my hands. You know, I could either sit there and be sad about it, or I could do something about it. So I decided that I wanted to enjoy my life, and that I was so much more than being sick. I was strong. I'd been very, very fit before, an athlete, and I knew that I had strength of body, but I also knew I was very strong in my mind. And so I started to look at ways that I could change my mindset and my perspective and just become a more positive person in my actions. And it took practice. You know, it does take practice when you start to change your behaviour, not to be affected by the sadness that you feel, you know, because at that age, all my friends were having children. Everybody around me, it's a bit like one of those things when suddenly something's taken away from you, you just notice it's not there anymore. But you could, and it becomes more apparent that people are having children, and things become, you know, something that you never noticed before becomes more noticeable. That's the only way I can explain it. And so I did very well, and I managed to get myself fit again. And I had to deal with a lot of the issues that come with radiation, because in those days it wasn't sort of pinpoint radiation, you know, and we didn't have internet. I know it might sound bizarre to some people, it makes me sound ancient, but we didn't have internet services. So I had to go to the library and get books and read about, you know, I can't believe it. I had to get books and read about cancer and how to deal with cancer and what I could do to help to heal my body. And I decided to go back into fitness and to start teaching people to behave in different ways and look after themselves. So I opened a small gym up in Manchester, and as a personal trainer and a coach. And I started to teach predominantly people that were dealing with weight issues, but I also had people that started to come who had diabetes, high blood pressure, depression, and I trained a lot of people in that time. I sort of had the gym for around about 10 years, but I travelled around doing personal training around Manchester for around about 15 years. So it was a big part of my life. And I got really good results with people. And I noticed that, again, the mindset things started to come in. You know, I had one or two health issues during that period of time that were related to the cancer. But I think because I was so fit and healthy, I was able to deal with those, you know, those things. So I just focused on other people and how I could help them and what I needed to do in order to help them. And I noticed that the language that I used with people and the language that they used to themselves was very relevant. And if I just could get people to think in a slightly different way, it would change their results. So it sparked my interest in Neurolinguistic programming, in becoming a master practitioner, which I'm qualified in. And I started sort of looking at mindset training and coaching in a different way. So looking at coaching the body, but also looking at developing the mindset in order to be more successful. But my time in Manchester has sort of come to an end, and I was moving to London. I'd gone into a relationship, and I sold my business, I sold my house, and I moved down to Manchester. And I moved down to London, which was a very different kettle of fish. I was sort of like a small fish in a big pond, whereas in Manchester I'd been a big fish in a small pond at the time, you know, because I'd opened the very first personal training centre in the north, I think, at that time. So I was quite sort of ahead of the game in training. And I'd only been in London probably for 2 months, no, a month and a half. My father passed away, which was quite devastating. And then further into that year, about 7 months into that year, I was then diagnosed with skin cancer. And 2 months after that, I was diagnosed with a brain tumour. It was just like what should have been an amazing sort of start to a new life in a different area it now became quite a battle. So all the things that I'd learned sort of came into force, I needed to bring them in again. I mean, the skin cancer in itself was unexpected, but they were able to cut that away. I just needed to make sure that I got checked and that I'm very careful in the sun. And you know, I do keep covered up. I'm pretty careful at making sure I wear good sunscreens, those types of things, and look after my skin, because it's very aging anyway, the sun. So, you know, that's one good reason not to sit in the sun for too long. But the brain tumor was possibly the most devastating thing that had ever happened to me, even though the cancer I'd had was horrendous. When they found the tumor, it was called a benign meningioma, and it was growing from my skull and pushing down on my brain. And I knew something was wrong for a few months. For about 18 months, I'd had tingling in my left foot. But I was still training clients, you know, I was still running and teaching and coaching. And I think the fact that I was so fit was a reason why I didn't really notice that there was something bad going on. But I was also a kickboxer, you know, I did Chinese kickboxing for 10 years. So I was this sort of dynamic, running around person, you know, that's all I'd known. And then I had a terrible headache one day, and I really couldn't lift my head up off the pillows. It went on for hours. You know, it was probably about 8 hours, and then I ended up in the hospital, in St Thomas's Hospital, and they did a scan straight away. By the time I'd got in for the scan, you know, I was at several hours in A&E and waiting to go in. By the time they did the scan, I was in a terrible state. And I decided to, you know, I had to stay in the hospital. They diagnosed me with this benign meningioma and said that I needed to stay in hospital. So I was in the hospital for about a week and a half, and then they released me home for about 4 days, and then I ended up in King's Hospital to have some brain surgery, and which sounds very bizarre to me now, because you know, you read about that sort of thing, but you never expect it to happen to you. So I had this brain surgery, and before they took me down to the surgery, they told me sort of my options, really. And there were two options. I either had the brain surgery and I may not be able to walk again as a result of having the surgery, because of where the tumour was, and it was very delicate surgery, which I appreciated. Or if I didn't have the surgery, it would kill me. The brain tumour would kill me. There was no room for it to grow, and left for it to grow. It got to that point. So obviously I opted for the brain surgery. And when I came round, I couldn't walk. I couldn't move my left leg because it was a right-sided tumour. So my left leg didn't function correctly. And suddenly I had another journey to make, you know, and that was to learn how to walk again. And that, I must say, was probably one of the toughest things that I'd had to do, because I didn't know how to walk. You know, until you have a limb that stops working for you, or limbs or muscles that stop working for you, you just don't know. You just don't appreciate them. You don't appreciate just how much your body does unconsciously for you. It just functions. It just moves for you. It assists you. It allows you to just get on with life. But when that stops and you have to think about it, the energy that you need in order to think is incredible. And so my journey began with one step at a time. And I was walking with sticks for probably about 2 years. On and off, you know, I could sometimes sort of leave my sticks if I was going a very short distance, but I actually fell over a lot. My proprioception, which was my balance, and my spatial awareness was completely gone. You know, I didn't know where my foot was going most of the time, and it was a very, very hard time. On top of that, I was also on a lot of steroids, a lot of painkillers and drugs, and you know, the plus side of that was that life was very calm and very internally very calm and very easy in that respect, because of the drugs. but I ballooned from around about 8.5 stone. I ballooned up to around about 13 stone in a very short space of time. And I lost myself. I didn't know who I was. I just looked at myself one day and asked myself, where have I gone? And so, you know, that journey, I had to really work hard um, to work out a way of walking in and getting myself well. So that took me round about 1.5 years to really start the rehabilitation. But in that time, I went to college and I learned how to do sign language, British Sign Language, so that I could get my hand-eye coordination going again. And I did lots and lots of physio for about 6 years to get myself walking again. But I also studied and became a master NLP practitioner. I also studied to become a independent natural juice therapist with Juice Master, because I knew that I needed to support my immune system. My body was starting to break down and I had to do something in order to support myself and in order to give my body the best chance of surviving and doing well and thriving. Because I didn't accept that I would never run again. You know, running to me was always something that gave me freedom. Training had always been something that had given me freedom. And my mantra had always been, as long as I have strength, I can do anything. But I was talking always about physical strength. I didn't realize that actually, as long as I have strength, I can do anything relates to your mind as well. And so my journey took me through a 6-year path of physiotherapy, learning how to walk, learning how to fall over, and I began to run and I began to start to live a little bit again. I had to change direction because my business had gone overnight pretty much. I couldn't go back to personal training. I just physically wasn't able to do that. I wasn't able to box again. You know, my movement was very jerky and very limited. But for me, the thing that kept me going was strength of mind and changing perspective to say to myself, if I started to say I can't do that, I would find a way of making something positive about the situation, you know, making that situation a positive situation. And it worked. It meant that I didn't slip into depression. I didn't slip into feeling sorry for myself. I mean, I did occasionally, but I used to do that quite privately because it was just something I didn't really want to do for long periods of time because it was destructive to my health and well-being. So I went into retail and opened a department store, which sounds a bit crazy. It was a bit crazy, but went into retail with my partner, and we opened a big department store, selling some amazing furniture and clearance and homewares. And it was a fantastic business idea, and it meant that I could go back to work and that I could sort of heal and I could start to, you know, feel like I was part of something again. And I really, really loved doing that. It was quite a big store. I employed around about 80 people, and it did very well. But that was in the northeast of England, and I had to move back down to the south of England. My mum wasn't particularly well by this time, and we were looking to open another business down in the south of England. So I moved down to London again, and took on the biggest project I've ever taken on, not just by myself. There was, you know, there was other people involved in the project. But I was the managing director of a very large department store, and it was exhausting, I have to say. You know, I'd recovered by this time, or was sort of fairly well recovered emotionally, but I still did have to sort of look after myself. But the business was enormous, and I you know, there was upwards of between 300 and 500 staff at any one time on the premises. It was a big business. And I had a lot of responsibility, and my days were very long and very, very hard. But it gave me something to focus on. You know, it was tough, but I loved it. You know, I really thrived, and I really enjoyed doing what I did, and I did it because I needed to do something, but I also wanted to create jobs and create a great business model for the community. But sadly, we just ran out of money and we couldn't sustain it. It was such a big project, and we had to put the business into administration. And that, to me, sort of spiraled me then into feeling as though I'd sort of failed in some way, and I'd lost direction. And I almost retreated. I retreated because I just felt it was awful, you know, having to do that, having to have that responsibility for people's jobs and for people's livelihoods was just incredible. And I'd also had a couple of seizures in that time where the stress had got to such levels that it had triggered seizure. I'd had two seizures, and I hadn't had any seizures since before I'd had my brain tumour. So I went to see my neurologist, and when I talked about what had happened, I decided that I was going to resign from all business projects, and that's exactly what I did. And that's where Juicy Joe's Kitchen was born, because I decided to put my energy into something that was that I was able to cope with at that time, and you know, something that made me happy, something that gave me some pleasure and I could be passionate about. And that's where Juicy Joe's came into, or Juicy Joe's Kitchen, but Juicy Joe's came into fruition. And I then started again coaching, but I started on the health coaching and the mindset coaching, and focusing in a different direction than I had before. Still working with the physical, but not personally working with the physical in as big a way. And that's how I've sort of how I've continued. Really, I've sort of pushed forward and started working with people on their health and well-being. Started promoting mindset change and running workshops. And then I found that clients wanted me to work with them in a holistic way, basically. So I would go out, and I still do this. I go out, I spend 2 days with my clients, and during that 2-day period, we look at all the aspects of their life, their health, their well-being, their environment, their activity levels, their buying habits, you know, their emotional behaviour, and the language that they use to themselves. And during those short periods of time that I spend with my clients, we can make some amazing changes. And that absolutely, I think, has been the whole reason for my journey, to today, has been to start giving back and start inspiring and motivating people to make changes in their own life that's going to support them. I think the one thing that I found was that until it's taken away from you, until something's taken away from you, you really don't appreciate it, and you just don't think it's going to happen to you. And I never ever thought things like that were going to happen to me, because I was so fit. But I didn't realise that I actually wasn't as nutritionally healthy as I thought I was. You know, I wasn't really paying attention to what I was putting into my body. So although I would have some good stuff, I was still not really supporting my system in the best possible way. And it may be that just genetically my body wasn't perhaps as strong. My immune system perhaps wasn't as strong as other people's. But I certainly know that as I've got older, I feel younger. I feel younger inside. I feel I have more energy. I still train. I train every day pretty much. You know, I walk, I run, I do yoga, I swim. I vary what I do, but I also listen to my body, and I rest, and I eat well, and I drink lots of water and I take my time. And if I feel that I'm getting overloaded or overrun by things, I take time out. And I think that's where a lot of people can benefit from just assessing what their behavior is in their lifestyle and, what they can do differently. We can all make improvements on what we do, and we can all sort of help to support other people as well if we know some good ways to behave or better ways to behave that are going to be more supportive. My role is now to spread the word, is to talk to people about how I've managed to overcome some very, very challenging situations and how they can overcome challenging situations just by believing in themselves and realizing that they're more than just their body. People are more than just their body. They have other skill sets, and it's about finding those skill sets when something does happen to you, or helping to prevent that even happening in the first place. And that's really where I'd like to be focusing. Now, I don't know if you have anything to add there, Marina, to what I've been saying.
Wow. I'm so grateful you are here. I think our listeners and our family Stardust needs to hear your story again and again and again. I think what I'm hearing your story second time now, and again, I feel that I'm taking from you is your ability to create this positive synergy. When you took control of your mind and you created a more hopeful perception of your reality, and your belief that you could do something greater than life.
Yeah.
I think is what saved you, and I think is what could save any of us. And not long ago, I took this journey. I retired when I was 51 years old.
Yes.
I done it all. I seen it all. So it was time for me to make room for the younger generation. And then I fell sick and I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand up. But now I'm 50. This summer I'm going to be 56 years young.
Yes.
I understand when you are saying you are getting younger. You are getting younger because now finally you understand that you don't only have a body. Your body could be a tool for hospital,
Yes.
but your mind is different. Your mind is the one where the adventure starts. Is the place. Is that one place where any adventure can start,
Yes.
and you could go anywhere because it's up to you. As long as you see it in your mind, it's happening in your own reality. So of course there are limits to how much your body can take in terms of acting
Yes.
according to your mind and to your vision. And we are all um, here for a limited period of time, but you made sure you are making the best of every single hour. So for you to go through skin cancer, cervical cancer, brain tumor, and then start a new business and hire 300, 400 people, for me is not something that I could imagine possible if wasn't for you to share your story. And this is what I want our listeners to take. They and myself, I have to accept that there is a Joanne in me as well.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that.
And who is there to stop me? So sorry.
That's okay.
We got messages throughout the show, so that's why I was reading the messages. So that there are great messages from all over the world coming to say
Oh,
thank you
fantastic.
for sharing your story. So there are some from London as well. So I'm thinking now, what is because you tend to play down everything
Yeah,
as if it's
yeah.
nothing. So what is exciting and is happening in your life right now? I could hear the birds singing. I know you came from a swim. Perhaps you are somewhere by the ocean. So what's happening in your life right now?
Yeah, I moved out of London. I moved down to the coast. So I live just outside of Brighton. I live in a place called Hove, and it's a very different lifestyle. Um, I do miss London, you know, in some instances, but it's just today we've had an amazing day, and I did my work. Spoke to a few clients this morning, and then I took myself down to the beach and I swam in the sea. You know, I think for me as well is that I like to live in now, in the moment, really, more than in what's coming for the future, and what's been past. So I talk about my story, and the reason I make light of it, I think, is because it's gone, and I can't change it. So I sort of almost detach that emotion from it because it's done. It's done. You know, it's been there, and it's taken me to where I am now. And I just think that everything I'm doing today is building my future. And I suppose I'm now this year. I decided that I would have 365 days to change my life. That was at the beginning of this year. That was in February. A couple of things happened earlier the year, and I just decided enough was enough. You know, I've got 365 days. I'm going to do something great. And so I also decided that if people offered me opportunities, I would say yes. And then I would work out how that was going to work and how it was going to happen afterwards. And since I've done that, it's incredible. The things that I've been asked to do, you know, coming to speak and to start for the first time to ever tell my story. Even some of my family have never heard my story because I've never told them. And there's still parts of it that I don't really talk about, not because I'm afraid of talking about them, but I think emotionally for some people it's too much. You know, it's just too much for them to take in. And so it really doesn't matter about the story. It's just about action and living, really. But this year I really want to sort of build my business up. I want to do more public speaking, you know, to get involved with more community projects, to look to mentor and inspire other people, to speak to women's groups about what it's like as a woman to go through life, you know, and how to deal with menopause, early menopause and normal menopause, because I've been through menopause twice now, because I'm 53 this year. So, you know, I didn't know that I would ever live to this age, and I'm very, very lucky that I'm at this age. But yeah, I think you know, to be able to talk to other women about the possibilities of living without children, the possibilities of, you know, when you go through the menopause, it's not the end of the world. You are still an attractive woman. You are still able to be a woman. You haven't failed at anything. You've succeeded because you're still here, you know, and I feel every day I'm very, very lucky because I'm still here. So now for me it's about people hearing my story, and it's about being Joanne, or being Joe, because a lot of my friends call me Juicy, which is quite weird, but they call me Juicy Joe, or just Joe. But now this 365 days, which I'm sure is going to go on longer than that, but is about Joe. It's about what I can do for other people, and what I can do to for my clients, you know, for anybody who wants my help, to find me. You know, instead of me thinking they're just going to find me if I just sit at home and wait, I want them to find me because I'm there, because I'm visible, and so I'm making myself visible with people like yourselves who are, you know, encouraging me and giving me the confidence, you know, because I may come across as being quite a confident person, because I am actually, but it's still a different area, an area I haven't worked in. And also talking about your story, I think, you know, often we don't talk about our stories because we just think, who's going to be interested in that? But when you do talk about it, it's unbelievable the feedback you get. You know, I've had some incredible feedback, which has been quite humbling for me. You know, I've loved that.
So I think your attitude towards life is about is contagious.
Yeah, thank you.
It is the critical thinking and your curiosity and your zest for life that makes you stand up. And I think the way I understand your essence, it is your stardust. You are coming from stardust. You are going to share your stardust.
Yes.
There isn't another way. And I want our listeners to get in touch with you and connect, and perhaps to start your own show. We are very happy for you to tell us, give us the date, and we are ready. So I would like to say only one thing, and that goes to you as a special dedication tonight.
Thank
You
you.
are stardust, Joanne.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
From both of us, until next time, remember, you are coming from stardust, and you are going to deliver your stardust. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.